Welcome into Behind the Wheelhouse. You're on Trucker Talk Radio with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. Our guest today is Sean Dehan, and if you've been around freight tech circles at all, you probably already bumped into his name. Sean is currently the VP of Corporate Strategy and Corporate Development at Truckstop.com, which, by the way, if you don't know Truckstop, you might be living under a rock. The number one load board in the country, founded in 1995, literally the first load board on the internet. So these guys didn't stumble into the freight space, they built it. Before Truckstop, he was senior director at ThinkDiv. So this is a guy who spent his career thinking about how tech companies create value, how they grow, how they get acquired, and how they serve their customers. And now he's applying all that to one of the most important platforms in trucking, truckstop.com. Sean, welcome to Behind the Wheelhouse, brother.
Thanks for having me. And I gotta tell you, I just need you to narrate the rest of my days for my life. I'll wake up and ready to run through a wall. I'm impressed by my own background now. So super excited to come on the show and talk with you guys.
How did this all come to be with Truckstop? Where did it start?
Yeah. So Texas born and bred. I grew up in Austin, went to the University of Texas, and after college, I left to work in Washington, D.C. at a consultant firm or a consultancy firm. It was the type of place that they put a 22-year-old college grad with a philosophy degree in front of CFOs that were running large businesses and had them talk to provide advice and guidance to, 40-year-old, 50-year-old guys that have been doing this for a long time and giving them guidance on corporate strategy and development and M&A and how to make it happen at their company. I mean, I would advise companies that you would know by name, Crocs being one of them, Five Guys being another. You've probably heard of some of these household names. So I had a lot of really interesting experience doing that. And from there, I actually leveraged that experience of advising CFOs on that to working in our internal corporate development and strategy department at our company. My whole career has really been about strategy and corporate development. So focused on how and where do we continue to deliver value to our customers? How and where do we leverage our comparative advantage and our capabilities to expand how we serve our customers? And then, of course, where are there opportunities to bring on capabilities or new comparative advantages through acquisition or partnership? Has been kind of my background for a really long time. I took that experience and I came back down to Austin and started working in consulting again, really focused on the middle market software world that's anywhere between kind of 10 million to $500 million in revenue. So it's a pretty big swath. Mostly PE-backed companies. We typically work for the private equity firm who
Mhm.
was doing the investment, whether it was a growth investment or a majority buyout. And we'd help them build out what we call a value creation plan. So what are the things that we're going to go do over this 3 to 5 year period that they're going to make this investment to, improve their return, right? That's all about
Right.
multiples on
Mhm.
invested income. So they're looking for making multiples of their money that they put into the business to begin with. And so that oftentimes would be combinations of go-to-market strategy changes, product strategy updates or advances or investments that were needed. So we would sort
Right.
of paint the whole picture and then oftentimes work with that portfolio company once the investment was made to execute the strategy. About 4 years ago, actually, today may be my anniversary. I kind of get a little hazy on it, but somewhere between the 15th and the 20th, I think,
Mhm.
was my first was my work anniversary, if you will. 4 years ago, I joined Truckstop. You guys might remember what was happening in the freight industry, and 4 years ago, and in May, we were sort of still a little drunk on the 2020, 2021 COVID run.
It was
Uh,
actually, yeah, it was
yeah,
actually March because I remember this. I was at the Mid-American Truck Show and I owned a
yeah,
trucking company, 65
yeah,
trucks. I was talking to a mentor of mine and I was like, how much longer do we have of this? Like, this is incredible.
yeah,
Our drivers are going home with ridiculous money and it's every single week. And he's like, we have at least a year and a half left of this. And
more.
it was, yeah, and it was probably May. It was maybe 4 to 6 weeks later.
Yeah,
And I get a call from my chief operating officer, and he's like, John, we got a problem.
yeah.
Like the rates have just completely dropped. And I was like, well, it's one day. And
Yep.
then it kept going and
Yep.
going. And then it just never stopped.
So when I tell you I came in at the very end, and honestly, it's been a little bit of a hold on and hold on for dear life kind of moment over the last 4 years, and really proud of what we've been able to do. We've faced a number of challenges as a business and headwinds as a business. And for the first one being just general market dissolution and market decline that's led in both rates that effectively were unsustainable and have been unsustainable for quite a while, as well as market participation, reduction in market participation, right? So there's just less
Mhm.
supply out there, and carriers are a really important part of our business, and having more carriers in the market, generally speaking, means more revenue for our company. And
Right.
then, of course, we dealt with the fraud challenges, right? And we were there on the front lines dealing with it.
I think a lot of our listeners might not realize this. Load boards aren't just job boards for trucks, right? There's a lot of complexity under the hood of what Truckstop is doing: rate data, fraud prevention,
Yep.
onboarding, compliance, which actually leads perfectly into what I want to talk about today. Because, Sean, Truckstop has been making some real noise around freight fraud. Like, this is becoming an epidemic in our industry. What are you guys doing about it?
I'll take you back to sort of the beginning. I'll take you to today. In 1995, Scott Moskop, our founder, had the vision for
I met
a better
Scott.
way. He was literally on the highway, driving from Texas actually to Idaho after he finished a post-grad program, and he saw, I think it was a billboard that said, need trucks or got trucks, call or need loads, call this number, right? And it was a number for a company called Dial a Truck. And he was like, there must be a better way. And he later found out that actually the better way that most people have is they go into the truck stops and they literally look at the boards and they say, let me hop in the phone booth and let me make a call. And he was a researcher and programmer. And he actually said, look, the better way is this internet thing. And this internet thing, is going to be a better way to manage this. So he took what was effectively all analog, and he started to work it into a internet load board, right? Over time, the load board had a number of waves that really helped drive adoption. One of the biggest waves that drove adoption was mobile, the advent of mobile apps and mobile smartphones that enabled us to all be on our phone all the time and have little computers in our pocket. Through our history, we've always put a massive importance on and understood our position in the industry as an enabling system that helps the industry find jobs, right? With whether it's a broker finding a truck or a carrier finding a job, we put a huge emphasis on keeping our marketplace as secure and veritable as we possibly can. And there isn't ever going to be a perfectly hermetically sealed marketplace it's just a figment of reality. And so everyone has to be cognizant and street smart and reasonable in their approach. But we're going to do everything we possibly can. So we've invested since the very beginning. In fact, our my founder Scott Moskop, who's our CEO as well, has told me stories about how he had disagreements with people that didn't think they should be making the investment in our fraud team and our security team. This was back in early 2000s. And the point was, we're not seeing any fraud. We don't see any of this. We're not seeing any issues. And his view is it's going to come, and we need to build the processes from the beginning. And so we've done that. Our load board has been, continually secured, and we've continued to make the changes that are necessary in order to secure the load board. That has come at the expense for Truckstop in many ways. One, our customers don't always love it, right? Our customers don't love when they get hit with some sort of fraudulent scheme in a load board, but they also don't love friction to access their jobs. And through the last 4 or 5 years, we've had to put more friction in place than ever existed before. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've kicked out and or kept from our system more than 100,000 different organizations from participating in our
Wow.
marketplace. Think about how much revenue that is if we just let them
Mhm.
participate, right?
Wow.
It turns out these fraudsters, they tend to be the most sticky and most high retaining customers because they have nowhere to go.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of drivers really think about their own identity being hijacked. They're more concerned about brokers on the load board itself being sketchy.
Yep.
That's what they're concerned with. They're not really thinking about, having their identity compromised.
This kind of sketchy broker can be a fake carrier, some sort of chameleon carrier, it can be any number of things
Hmm.
and sort of turn around and start operating in the different directions. So you have to be careful on both sides, right? Like we effectively stopped allowing for brokers to drag and drop loads from an Excel spreadsheet or from any sort of spreadsheet because what we found was almost all perpetrated fraud schemes were coming from a drag and drop Excel file. Why is that? Because they were trying to, maximize the surface area of their fraud so they could, hook some unwitting trucker, and if they only posted one load, they probably aren't going to be successful, right? If they posted
Yeah.
thousands, they have a chance of being successful. One in a thousand probably have a chance of being successful. And they don't ever post via API because they don't have access to the TMSs, right? So they can hack maybe a load board credential. They can phish someone for a load board schematic, but they can't go into the TMS typically to post from that. And so we actually took that off, and we've seen a massive drop in fraudulent load postings as well. But that was something that our customers didn't love. Our good customers
Right.
didn't love that because there were plenty of good customers,
Mhm.
legitimate operating freight companies that have now had to figure out other ways to post, and we've had to make decisions that impact the good because of the bad, and that's hard for business. But in the end, our view is that a safe and secure marketplace is the right thing for our customers and the right thing for the industry, right? And we want to help level up the standard and the expectation in the industry.
Well, I don't think that all size drivers, corporate, or any of that really understands, and we say this on the show all the time, how smart these bad apples are. I mean,
Yeah.
they're getting faster and smarter than we are on any of our security. Could you explain a little bit, how y'all's process works on the fraud? Like, because to be the forefront and leader of trying to do it, you've got to kind of almost think like a criminal
Yep.
and start seeing, patterns just like you with the spreadsheet. Because like John said, drivers just look at one thing, or carriers like, hey, I want to be able to make it simple as possible, but you really can't. So could you speak on that, how you try to stay ahead? Because it's really impossible because
Yeah.
the criminals think in such a way that the normal person just doesn't, and that puts them ahead every time.
100%. Yeah, we talk about that a lot. That, most of the time, if you tell one of these really riveting fraud stories where maybe there's some strategic cargo theft involved, most people's jaws are on the floor that it happened that way. And they're like, how
Mhm.
could that? It's like, well, you just don't think like a criminal, like where
Yeah.
there's a will, there's a way, man. And these
That's right.
criminals have a lot of
Yeah.
will. They have very little consequence right now still, and there's a lot of prize at the end of the road for them. What I'll say, Justin, is we are actually, and I don't say this glibly. I don't say this as an evasion. We are actually very careful to not talk too much about all of the specific things that we
Mhm.
do because they're
Makes
very
sense.
smart, and you can't underestimate the fact that they
They're
could be listening
listening.
to our programs like this.
Right.
They could be taking in data like this. They could have
Absolutely.
AI
It's
programs
serious.
Mhm.
that are scraping things to learn what companies are doing in order to fight some of the fraud.
Mhm.
But I will say the biggest advantage we have as a company in fighting fraud is our scale and the level of data and activity that we see across our platform all day, every day, right? What we end up being able to see across that are patterns of activity that tend to be leading indicators of evolving threat vectors. So whether that may be, jumping VPNs, it could be, coordinated swarm attacks, it could be any number of things. We see the data across the platform, and we're able to associate DOTs and MCs to IP addresses to VPN pings to all different types of digital footprints. And that's the stuff that we're trying to do offensively, right? We're trying to identify these patterns offensively and then build in the right logic and the right defense mechanisms to catch and notify our systems, to lock down our systems. The bad news is that they have AI that helps them now, right? The good news for us is that we also have AI, and so if we can put ourselves in their shoes and also see their patterns, we can sort of
Mhm.
fight fire with fire, if you will, right? We're never going to be perfect. They're always going to be pushing a little bit further, and trying to find patterns and ways around it. Typically speaking, they're going to go after the areas of where one point of entry gets them large
Mhm.
access to many things, right?
Well, I think you make a good point that a lot of companies don't. You're being offensive. You're on the offense. We talked about football before we got going. Sounds like Truckstop is on the offense instead of being on defense and reacting. It seems like a lot of these companies that react, it's too late. And our government's the same way, right? With all this in the industry, it's been a reaction. There was never any offense, they all knew all this stuff was starting to happen with fraud and
Yeah.
the non-domicile, but they didn't do anything. But they had to wait till the big crash in Florida. So I appreciate Truck Stop and yourself, being on the offense, trying to combat it on the front
And
lines.
I'll tell you guys, about 3.5 years ago when this whole fraud storm really started, right? It was kind of toward the back end of 2022, which is right after the market really started to become challenging. I was new to the industry, right? And I was like, tell me, like, why wasn't this a problem a year ago, right? Why weren't we having this issue a year ago? And people are desperate. And I said, you're telling me all these people are breaking bad? Like they were good and now they're breaking bad and they're just committing fraud? And I think it was a little bit of a lazy response that people gave me.
Yeah.
Because what I've now found is that they weren't totally wrong, that there is desperation, but I think there's also apathy, right? And so I'll give you an example of apathy and a problem that we really have to solve in this industry is when people sell their MCs. So sold MCs is a huge problem. Not because you're selling your MC. That's a normal thing to sell a business and to sell the assets of the business with it. But when you start to give things like your PIN number, your safer PIN, your DAT login, your truck stop login, your RMIS verification code, your highway verification code as part of the sale, your email address, which is generally speaking, by the way, a gmail.com address, almost always.
Mhm.
It's almost rarely a business. So it's not like an asset in the company. It's just like it's like a gmail.com almost.
Right.
Even in some cases, your cell phone, selling your cell phone to that person. And then to top it off, like all those things, normal, right? It's normal to sell assets. I'm sure, John, I think you said you sold your trucking business. You probably
Yeah.
sold a lot of that stuff in that
Yeah.
business, right? But I bet you John, someone told the government that there was a change of ownership. Someone filed a change of ownership with the
Yep.
FMCSA
Mhm.
And
because
the
that is
state.
what you are supposed to
Yep.
do.
Hmm.
And what's happening is that there are these bad actors that are buying these MC numbers for $10,000 to $100,000,
Hmm.
and they're buying everything that comes with it, and no one is notifying the FMCSA, and so this bad actor has 6 months to 12 months to go trade on the good reputation of that previous business and perpetrate strategic cargo theft, fraud schemes, and the like. And what I mean by apathy is that I think most of these people know that what they're being asked for is like a little sketchy. Like, you want my cell phone? What do you want my cell phone for? Just like use your own. It's no big deal. Just change the phone number. It's not a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
no
It's
issue,
the
That's
right?
truth.
true. That's
Yeah.
that's a good point.
I did not sell my cell phone in the sale of my company. I
Right.
can tell you
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
but oh, that's weird, right? Like your spidey senses start to tingle. But I think there's a little bit of apathy, right? Like I've been burned. I've been in this industry. I've been going for a long time. I haven't made a profit in 2 or 3 years, and this person's giving me $20,000. Like it's a way out. I can get out, clean up things. It's all done. And once that happens, it's like nothing ever changed except for the person on the other side changed. And so there isn't a good answer for that yet. The government really does have to step in some way, shape, or form and increase the penalty that is kind of wrought out on the seller of that business if they don't, file with the government that there was a sale. Speaking of which, like if you don't file, there's like tax implications and you're evading taxes too. Like there's all these reasons, right?
We had Genlogs on a few weeks ago, and we talked to them about it. They were showing us a map of Chicago, right? A small
Yeah.
suburb of Chicago, and there's 200 building structures, but yet there's 500 carriers registered in that
Yeah.
location. So
Yeah.
it's like, where are these guys? Who are these guys?
Yeah.
Mhm.
No one knows.
Yeah.
No one knows the drivers that are actually attached under their MC number. No one does any type of formal verification. It's a
Right.
big problem.
They must have a lot of truck parking in that area. Right.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Fast.
If I memory serves, it was mainly a residential area too.
It
So
was.
Yeah.
yeah,
They're large driveways.
Yeah,
there you
exactly,
go.
exactly, exactly.
So let's zoom out a little bit because you've been pretty vocal about what's coming with AI and freight. You've talked about AI kind of eating the digital brokerage model. What does that mean for the average carrier that's listening?
I think that there are a couple places you can go with AI today. Like zooming out from Truckstop, I think there's a lot of reasons to be afraid and nervous about AI in a lot of applications, and I understand those things. But it's here, it's arrived, and how can you use it to benefit your business? I know for a fact because we have many brokers as our customers, largest brokers as our customers, they're figuring out how to leverage this technology to compete better. The brokerage business is an incredibly cutthroat, incredibly competitive industry, and none of them are going to be flat-footed, and they're all going to be make the right investments. Some of them will build it themselves, some of them will go with third parties. Either way, they're investing in AI in some way, shape, or form. I think everyone is still figuring out exactly where it best fits in trucking and where it's going to make the most amount of impact. Because I do know that a lot of people don't want to talk to AI still, right? And I see it
Mm.
across the board. On the carrier side, what we're seeing and what we view as an opportunity, we had a really interesting conversation at Matt's, a lot of carriers, and almost everyone's using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Grok. Almost everyone's using that in a chat context. You guys are probably using it.
Oh, most
All of our
definitely.
truckers are using it. It's one of those
Every day.
technologies that really has just like penetrated the market. And so almost
Mhm.
everyone has some experience with it today and has had some value, right? Like I get a ton of value from it, but I also see all the ways in which it falls short of my expectation, and doesn't deliver what I want it to deliver. And so they're very open. Carriers are very open. Truckers are very open to using the technology, but the like broad chat application, as it were, today is not suited and not positioned for trucking. And so what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to bring it into the trucking context. And so, I see a future in which just like we put a mobile app in everybody's pocket that had a bunch of jobs on it for carriers back in the late 2000s when smartphones kind of first came out, to early 2010s, 2011, 2012, when it became really normal for people to have apps on their phones. We're going to see carriers have dispatchers in their pocket. That's
Mhm.
the next step. It seems totally inevitable. Call it a dispatcher, call it an assistant, call it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be, the dispatcher might have the wrong connotation, but gone are the days in the next few years where carriers have to flip through with their thumb thousands of loads. Gone are the days that they have to put in the context through filters and through searches
Yeah.
to find freight. And here are the days where everything can be hyper personalized. And that is what I think AI really promises, is we can take the general and make it incredibly personalized. And that promise, I think, is something that we can deliver as a company to our carriers. And I think it's something that our carriers really desire. There will be some that push back. There will be some that have concerns about giving more context to Truckstop, giving more context to an AI so that we can create the personalization. There will be some that absolutely adopt it full steam ahead and see all the value in the world from it.
How important do you think that if we go that direction, which I agree, I think we're definitely going in that direction, that the driver has to take value in their whole business, their CDL information, their driving history, to where they have that, so then it's more one space that has that. So then the AI company that's doing the dispatching basically for them, they know exactly who that driver is to make it to where it's been vetted. They're legal to do that. They've got, a certain, they might have, documents that they can get onto a base. They might need a certain, tanker endorsement. How important do you think that something like that is done? Because there's, AI is great and computers are great, but just you made an example with chat. I use chat a lot, but it veers offline all the time. It knows everything I talk about. I talk to it daily, but yet when I'm in my
Your buddy
procedures,
chat.
my buddy chat, but he will not stay strict. He always floats to the right or the left of my conversation at some point, and I get so pissed off about it because we've talked about it day after day after day. So that's the one thing that worries me with that is maybe it's go, okay, that guy's name's close enough to that guy's name, but he's legit, and then you're able to slide that back to after. And so I think it's important for drivers, if we're going that route, to take a stand and have their information in a credible place to prove who they are.
Yes. So I think what you're talking about, Justin, is what I call, or what we call, context.
Mhm.
And all of the context around your business matters if you're going to be successful scaling your business, growing your business, using other resources in your business. Just like, I mean, this is really not an attack on human dispatchers, but like, imagine you had a human, a normal dispatcher company. Wouldn't you want to give them like as much information as possible so they could serve you best? And like when they call you with a load, it's like a good one, as opposed to one that's irrelevant. You're like, to that point, I don't have a permit to go on that government on that base, that army base. Like, why are you giving me this freight? Like that doesn't make sense to me. Oh yeah, sorry man. Like I totally. Oh, I'm talking to Justin. Oh, I thought I was talking to Jonathan. Okay, my bad.
Mhm.
Like that. You don't. That's a bad experience with a dispatcher. So the expectations at a minimum are as similar as they would be with a human, but they're probably higher, right? Because you know, if your son or daughter or colleague sort of has an opinion on some things, maybe you'll be like less frustrated with them when they start to veer off into those opinions. But when your
Right.
AI is like, you're like, dude, we talked about this, man. Remember it. Like, stop. That's the same way, right? That it's a we have very, very high expectations for the technology that we have, very, very high expectations for it delivering the value we need. And, a challenge we've had at Truckstop is everyone wants to match the perfect truck to the right load. Everyone. That is like everyone's goal. Truckstop is no different. We would love to be able to do that. If we can take out as much friction and just give you the load that makes sense for the truck, we can solve a lot of problems in this industry. The problem is that the first time you do it, John, if I send you a load and I say, John, I found you the golden load, man. This is the load. And you say, that's not a good load for me. If I come back to you and say, John, I got you a load, it's the load you need. Are you going to believe me the second time after I screwed up the first time? No, right? Like
Percent.
I've already lost the trust. And so the minute I say, hey, here's some recommended stuff for you,
Mhm.
Yeah.
5 loads that you should take, and you're like, they're all garbage. I'm in Dayton, and this is telling me to go. This is freight from in Atlanta. Like that doesn't help me, right? I'm
Mhm.
not deadheading to Atlanta. Find me something
Yeah.
from Dayton to Atlanta, then I can take those Atlanta loads, right? What's going through your head. You don't trust the next time anyone talks to you, right? And so
Mhm.
AI gives us the opportunity. I oftentimes call it AIPI, which is like, our ability to connect systems that don't exist, right? So I can connect the brain of a person or the reality of a person, the context of a person to a system and to a database. And I can
Mhm.
then apply rules and logic on top of that provide you with a ton of value. And before that, I didn't have any of your context. The only way you could give me your context was by filtering freight. But now you can give me your context. I can say, John, what's your plan today? Where are you at? What do you want to do this week? What do you want to achieve? How much revenue do you want to make? You can give me all that information, and I can work for you every single day to make sure you achieve that goal, right? And as things change, you went left instead of right. You just tell me, I went left instead of right. Things have changed. Great, perfect. Well, we're gonna rework the plan, right? That's the future, I think, and that's the future we're kind of building toward.
Do you see a time, and how soon do you see it, where Truckstop AI is negotiating with broker AI, who's negotiating with carrier AI, who's passing it off to driver AI to make
Yeah,
that final decision?
yeah, yeah. I don't know about the negotiation. I think that the negotiation is probably the last thing to get fully automated.
Mhm.
And that is in part because that's what we hear from our customers, that they don't really want to be negotiated. I think that there will be like a bell curve. There will be people that are new to the industry that don't feel comfortable negotiating that will be more likely to allow an AI to negotiate for them. There are people who have been in the industry for a long time that think that they're good at negotiating and couldn't trust an AI to negotiate, that will continue to negotiate. So I think we're like we've got a really long process before we're really at the point where we've got a large swath of carriers and drivers allowing for negotiation to happen that way. I think what's more likely is like lots of human in the loop stuff over time. So, hey, I talked to the broker, they want this amount of money. I'm on the line with them, do you want to accept that or do you want to offer more? And you just say offer more, offer 1400 instead of 1300. Okay, great.
Right.
And then it just kind of does that for you and it's sort of like a system over time. I think brokers would probably like to have that happen sooner rather than later. because especially high volume brokers, because they just want to get to like a market clearing price and then continue to move and continue to move and just push freight, and they're okay with margins being a little lower over time, because they're driving high volumes. Smaller brokers can't do that, right? Like they need to have control over their margin. Higher margins are important for them in order to compete, and pay their bills. So I don't know that that future's coming anytime super soon. I think we'll see cases where it happens, things of that nature, but it'll be the minority.
All right, well, I want to change the subject just a little bit. I noticed in my research that Truckstop recently expanded further into heavy haul and oversized
Yeah,
freight with your WiseLoad acquisition.
yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that. Why is that sector becoming, more important, and why did y'all see the need to try to grow that side of Truckstop?
yeah. Great question. I think that there's a couple things in play. Truckstop is the leading load board bar none in the open deck sector. Like it just is. We believe we can do better for that marketplace. And I think I talked to you about, I mentioned this concept of general to personal or general to specialized, general to specific. The load boards have been general marketplaces for as long as they've been around. And we've got mass adoption that was certainly driven even further by the COVID run up. But load boards, we believe, at least in part, the future of load boards is actually a much more specialized and personalized view of the world. So I'll give you an example. Van freight probably can be automated from a negotiation and tendering perspective, without a phone call. Because if it fits in a box, it fits in a box, it fits in a box. And so like that type of freight probably can be just automated. Open deck freight really can't be, because there's so much nuance to open deck freight. Am I dropping this thing in a field and you're rolling a crane over to me and unloading it? Am I chaining this load? Am I tarping this load? Tell me what part of the thing is hanging off my deck. And is this a super load? Is it a out of gauge load? Like, tell me about this freight, right? You've got to have more information about the freight and more information about the move. Generally speaking, you're not just going to a warehouse A and then ending up at warehouse B and
Right.
having
Is
it
it
loaded.
permitted or not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
is it permanent? All
Yeah.
there's a lot of nuance to it, right?
Right.
And so our view is that, and our customers have told us that, like, hey, we need more tools and we need more specialization from you, right? We love how much freight's on the board, but there's a lot of things that go into this beyond just finding the freight. We got to make the decision. We got to execute the load. We've got to have different types of details and information than you need if you're just bumping docks with a van or a reefer. And so that's our bet, right? Our bet is that we can deliver more value into the open deck industry, and then likely others as well, through more personalization, more specialization in our load board. So the WiseLoad acquisition was really part of that. The WiseLoad is a tool that really serves brokers. Brokers and carriers kind of take different approaches to how they quote and rate and price a heavy haul move. And so this product is really designed for brokers to enable them to set a baseline for what the complexity of the move will be, what the cost of the move will be for a trucker, and figure out how to price that shipment back to a shipper. What we've learned over time and through our discovery in this space is that, an interstate move that includes multiple states of an out of gauge piece of freight can take someone a day, maybe even two, to quote on the brokerage side, because they haven't moved it before. They haven't moved these specific states. They got to go do all the research. There's lots of stuff. You can ask AI, but like, what if it messes up, right? Like,
Sure.
like these are not things you want to mess up, right? You end up with that freight and you're all of a sudden losing money on something you should be making a ton of money on. And so what WiseLoad really does, it takes that 24-hour, that 2 day, 2 business day effort, and makes it a 1 minute effort, and gets you to a place where you can confidently say, "Hey, I can get a carrier for this price." Maybe you need to get a little more competitive. Maybe you need to eat into your margin a little bit. That's okay too. That happens. But what it gives you is a confidence that you can quote a carrier for that price, and so it's kind of our first of many things that you'll see from us. We launched a heavy haul load board for carriers earlier this year, and that's just building out more specific features for heavy haul carriers. We're going to continue to iterate on that and deliver more and more value over time on that. You think about AI, right? Yeah, we're going to certainly have different AI assistants and AI agents that are helping our carriers. I can almost guarantee you that we're going to have a specific one for heavy haul. right? This is a different industry. It's a different space. It's a different need. There's different learning that agent has to have on different types of language models and different types of algorithms and data sets that it has to have that a van or even a legal flatbed or even just a reefer doesn't need, right? And so
Mhm.
we're going to continue to just develop down this path, and because we believe that with the technology of AI, that this will become the expectation, that things become more specialized and more personalized to make our customers more effective and more successful.
Well, this episode is brought to you by Ready App, Be Ready, Be Verified. Before we close out today, I got two questions for you.
Yeah.
One, will Texas beat Florida in Texas this kind of upcoming football season? That's for Justin.
Okay.
And then two, we talked about AI agents. A lot of our listeners and a lot who are drivers are very concerned about autonomous trucks. How soon are we to be having humans outside of the truck, if ever? Justin and I have voiced our opinions on here, and we're curious to get yours.
All right, so I'll take the Florida one first. I think, Justin, I want you to come down to Austin.
Yes, sir.
When you come down, we'll go get some barbecue.
All right.
And I promise we won't have barbecue gator until after the game.
After the game.
Uh,
Understood. Understood.
anyways, it'll be whether or not we win or lose, it'll be a fun game. It's always fun to have a blue chip, blue blood program come down to Austin and play and play in DKR, and it'll be a good time. And I think we'll open up a can on them, but we'll see.
You
We
should.
should be upset about what happened last year at the very
Yeah.
minimum. If we can't get motivated for that game, I don't know what we can. On autonomous, man, it's a really interesting conversation. I'm very excited about it. I think it's a very interesting future. I don't know about you guys. I love driving. I love riding in a Waymo.
I have not ridden in a Waymo yet.
Okay, well, come down to Austin. There's tons
Yeah,
of
we
them.
don't have. We're supposed to be getting here from Tampa here
I
soon,
would
but
imagine Tampa would be like a
yeah,
place that you get them. Yeah.
yeah,
Here's another argument for carriers to think about how to make their businesses more defensible. Okay, I can't tell you when autonomy is going to happen. I can't tell you when trucks are going to be driving on their own. I can't tell you how the legal system will slow that down or not, right? Think about the first thermonuclear verdict against a driverless truck that gets into an accident, fatality. Like that's going to be an insane moment, right? But I think as progress is made, the progress is going to be made in high volume lanes that are relatively straightforward for commodity freight like dry van. If your business is hauling between Houston and Dallas out and backs, and that's all you're doing, well, I hope you're buying some autonomous trucks over time
yeah.
because that's
Mhm.
probably where this market goes.
Right.
You probably won't be able to compete on price against those autonomous trucks because the autonomous trucks, terminal to terminal, like Houston, Dallas, that's an easy run. Anything goes wrong, you quickly update the software in Houston when you get into the place with enough bandwidth and you're off to the races. If you're running heavy haul, open deck, flatbed, expedited, pharmaceutical specialized, I don't see that getting to a place in the near term where we've got autonomous vehicles. There's too many complexities. I think about autonomy is really good in single player games or single threaded games.
Right. Well
Um,
said.
Mhm.
challenging and multi-threaded, multi complexity games. So like who's going to tarp that thing? Who's going to strap that thing? Who's going to put the chains on that thing? It's certainly not the shipper. That's why
Yeah.
they pay the carrier, right? Like they're not interested in taking that liability of what if this thing slips off onto the road, right? Like no, that's not their interest. That's why they pay the carrier to do it. And so I see parts of this industry going that way and parts that don't. Maybe ever. I'm bullish on autonomy as a technology, but I don't think there's reason to be afraid across the entire industry. And if I'm in the business of trucking, I'm thinking about, am I differentiated? And is the service I'm delivering to my customers something that is hard to replicate
Right.
because of the nature of the run, the nature of the equipment, the nature of the commodity, whatever it may be. That's the way I'm thinking about it right now, and I'm trying to position my business well for that.
Great. Great. Well said. Well, before we roll out, Justin, you want to thank our sponsors? Really appreciate Sean coming on today.
Yeah, Sean, we do. We definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing some time with us and our audience. This episode is brought to you by Gray Cross. That's graycross.org. Gray Cross is focused on supporting trucking families and the people who keep America moving every day. When drivers and trucking families face medical emergencies, financial hardship, loss of income, or loss of life, Gray Cross works to provide real assistance and support during difficult times. And then our other main sponsor, we always want to thank them, is Radiapp. Radiapp is helping modernize the connection between drivers, carriers, brokers through verified driver profiles. The driver passport is a major thing, streamlined onboarding tools designed specifically for the trucking industry. Drivers can organize their CDL information, work history, endorsements, certificates. All their onboarding documents are in one place in one professional profile that can be shared directly with companies, recruiters, DOT, you name it, you can send it, insurance companies. So go check that out. That's ready-app.com.
Awesome. Well, Sean, thank you for coming on today. We really appreciate it. We'll hope to talk to you soon. We'd definitely like to take you up on some barbecue down in Austin sometime.
Let's do it. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
See ya.